Hello everyone, GeneralApple here with another House in Fata Morgana video, and I know the order is very wrong, so I have to be honest here. I actually recorded Tales Wasted Away in Obscurity, and for some god-awful reason, I have no idea how, I completely forgot to upload it, and I ended up deleting it, so now I have to re-record everything. So thank you guys actually for reminding me that I'm stupid. And without further ado, let's just play it. Tales Wasted Away in Obscurity. I already know what's gonna happen. We're gonna have 3 short stories, so I'm gonna be less surprised. But it was actually such a good read, so I really don't care. It was really, really good. It's so funny that I actually forgot. I feel so bad. Damn. This is crazy. Tales afforded not to their moment in the limelight, left to waste it away in obscurity. Okay, so we got the slow killing poison, defective, and the paintings rambling. So we're gonna go by order. That's how I did it the first time. Slow killing poison. The maid spoke little of what happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the era of roses, for she believed the rest of the tale insignificant, of no value to share with her listener, the white-haired girl herself. Thus, her role as a storyteller ended with the girl's departure from the stage, and while the other character stories continued on, they were cut from the script, afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. 1. A slow-killing poison. Arthur Baldwin was vexed. Shortly before they were to be married, his engagement with Nellie Rhodes, eldest daughter of the Rhodes family, had been broken off. He understood well enough why it had happened, and had it been his decision, he likely would have made the same one. So Arthur's dissatisfaction lay not with the dissolution itself, nor did he bear any fault in it. His bride-to-be had simply been gripped by madness. I hear she attacked an Abigail. Oh, I was told she took one of her eyes out. Even worse, she killed her. Those are but rumors, my dears. The truth is so much more dreadful. I used to work at the Rhodes Manor, you see, and the young lady Initially, Arthur was skeptical of what the people were saying. He assumed the tales were being exaggerated as it spread. But when the head of the Rhodes family came personally to deliver reparation and formally nullify the engagement, he gave Arthur a rough overview of what had happened. It was apparently true that Nellie had assaulted an Abigail, and it was true that she spent most of her life or time in a room now, looking pale and sickly and drained of her spirits. And then, when he said outright, a demon possessed her, Arthur had little choice but to believe something wasn't right. And to top it all off, Nellie's older brother Mel ran off to become a priest, presumably to get away from everything. Nellie's father implored Arthur to remain discreet about her situation, not that he had any intention of going around and spreading personal details about her life. However, rumors have a nasty way of slipping through the tiniest of cracks, sneaking about through the dark like seasoned cat burglar. What nobles like to refer as social gathering were in practice more like gossip gatherings, and in short order, the Rhodes family eldest daughter was a talk of high society. Incidentally, the painter whose downfall eventually culminated into this tragedy was also strangled by the noble grapevine, though Arthur had no way of knowing as much. Perhaps the painter curse extended beyond the girl's hair color, and the Rhodes family was destined to be brought to ruin by the gossip of their fellow aristocrats. One evening, Arthur decided he would sneak into the Rhodes Manor. He had requested visitations with Nellie on numerous occasions, but he'd been turned away every time. She's in no condition for company, was what they kept telling him, which left him no choice but to see her uninvited. The aroma of the roses seemed more overpowering at night than during the day, and he wasn't sure whether it was just his imagination. The nagging irritation it caused in him was, however, not only in his mind. Arthur instructed his coachman to wait on the street a little ways out and made the rest of the way to the manor on foot, entering through the garden. As he waded through the sea of roses, he clenched his teeth. Arthur preferred restraint when it came to both gardening and girls. What am I doing with my life? How did I end up here, sneaking about trying to find that obnoxious little girl room? Arthur had a few pleasant memories of this rose garden. The Rose and Baldwin had a long history, so as a child, he would often find himself left here to play while adults did business. It was him, Nellie, who could never seem to stop hanging off her brother, and Mel, the textbook definition of a well-behaved aristocrat boy. Not once had he managed to step into the siblings' pirate world. There was only room for the two of them, leaving Arthur stuck out there all by himself. The best he could manage was a little teasing now and then. For example, saying her hair looked like the color of fallen leaves. I never asked for this engagement anyway. Who would even want to marry a girl who thinks herself some kind of princess? Not me, that's for sure. But still. He had known her practically his whole life. Of course he was going to be curious when people were saying she had gone mad or been possessed by a demon. He was just curious, he told himself as he drew near to Nellie's window. The curtains appeared to be drawn. He couldn't see anything inside, so he crouched down to pick up a few pebbles to toss over the veranda. I still have no idea how to say it. A few soft taps rang out in the night before the curtain finally shifted. A moment later, a young girl stumbled out into the moonlight. Despite already knowing the answer, his first thought was, "Who's that?" He wanted to smack himself, but at the same time, it was hard to deny the discrepancies between the girl standing there and the girl of his memories. The moonlight seemed to give her flaxen hair a ghostly bluish tint. It fluttered in a passing breeze, and Arthur felt something about her he never had before. She's so pretty. Whoa, slow down, what's wrong with you? Pretty? That self-centered, spoiled little brat. There wasn't a trace of the rambunctiousness Nellie he knew to be found. He stood there by the veranda's railing, gazing vaguely off into space like a pensive spirit. It wasn't at all what Arthur had expected to see when he came calling. He assumed she would be nothing but skin and bones, haggard and unsightly. Now, Lady Nellie, do you not think it rude to not at least greet me? We were engaged, as you might recall. Her eyes still unfocused, Nellie turned her gaze down towards where Arthur stood. It was a reaction, but still, he felt as though she had snubbed him, which did little to alleviate the irritation building up since he had arrived. Looks like it's a scene right after your beloved Romeo and Juliet. Not that I'm here enthusiastically, of course. Mumbling complaints to herself, Arthur climbed a nearby tree, leaping from a branch into the veranda. And there she was, within arm's reach but as distant as ever. Still, he could see nothing in her eyes. Hello? Say something already, would you, Nellie? Perhaps she really had lost her mind, just not in the way he had been led to believe. Arthur spent a few moments pondering how to proceed. He didn't consider himself a model gentleman like Mel, not even slightly, but he wasn't so crass as to laugh it off either. You certainly are quiet tonight, aren't you? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to act when you're like a completely different person. Every time you open your mouth, I want to sew it shut. You're always complaining, nothing ever good enough for you. But right now, I just want you to say something. Anything. How am I supposed to know what's going through your head if you don't tell me? Or is there just nothing at all? Nellie gazed glided past Arthur, and to the rose garden behind him. Nellie, are you listening to me? He tried again and again to get her attention, calling her name, waving his hand in front of her face, gently tugging on her hair. But all his attempts were fruitless. She simply stood there, lifeless, a well-crafted doll. He wasn't sure exactly how to describe how he felt. Slightly unsettled to start, a bit of pity to go with it, and a great deal of something yanking at his insides. Arthur had a few pleasant memories with the roads. That didn't mean he wanted to erase his past with them entirely, though. But looking at her, this empty shell, he felt almost as though those days were disappearing with her. How irritating. He knew the word wasn't right, but he went with it anyway, heaving a sigh after letting it linger in the air for a moment. It's always been like this. I'm no more than a buzzing insect to you. I can't stand this dreadful rose garden. It was exhausting having to come here again and again just because our families are close. I would try to say something and you'd go running off to your darling brother's arms. Dearest Mel this, dearest Mel that, is that all you know how to say? And he would just give you a heartfelt smile and pretend to be sorry for not paying attention to you. Arthur looked out over the garden as well. He was more talking to himself than he was to Nellie. I'm sure you don't remember, but one time I even brought you flowers. What were they? Some kind of anemone, I think? But you wouldn't take them. You said the roses here were prettier, so you didn't need my flowers. What a miserable day that was. But standing beside his silent spectre, melancholy, overwhelmed any anger or frustration he might have otherwise felt. Perhaps it was because nothing he said managed to elicit any reaction out of her. Or perhaps because he wished he had come out and said it all sooner. Unless expressed, feeling merely fester. I don't care one bit about you, and I mean that. It's only ever been about doing what's best for my family. Of course, Nellie was a perfect example of why I couldn't let anything out either. The gossip spoke not only of her attacking an Abigail, but her destroying her relationship with her brother. And that was likely what had done the most damage. Knowing what he knew of Nellie in her youngest days, Arthur had little trouble believing what the rumor said, that her affection for Mel went far beyond simple familial love. It was for my family, but it doesn't mean I wasn't going to try to get along with you. You probably don't believe me, since I certainly never acted like it, but I genuinely did want us to be on good terms. You had to be the one who changed first. You were always treating me like I was worthless, like I meant nothing to you. Not like any of that would have even left an impression in your one-track mind, of course. But that's why I wanted to take the first step. I'm not some wise old monk who can just turn my frustration off on command. Arthur left another sigh. Do you think anything would have gone differently if I'd been more grown up? A gust of wind blew through, sending up a flurry of rose petal, carrying them up past the two of them and through the velvet curtains into Nellie's bedchamber. A faint smile crossed her lips. Arthur could only guess at what was going through her mind, what was reflected in her eyes. In her room, he could see several pairs of small children's shoes, a doll with its hair all neatly made up, a pile of sheet music drawn up for her by a respected composer years earlier, and toys carved from wood. It was like he was looking through a window into the past. That was all he needed to know. He could have treated her like the princess she thought she was, and she would have gone down the same path. Nellie's eyes were on one person only. Arthur wasn't even a shadow on her peripheral. Your brother's still smiling for you in there, isn't he? And that was all she needed. Yeah, so just to summarize what happened, it was so damn good. It was so good. Even reading it the second time, it's so good to see how Arthur dealt with all the pain Nellie caused him during the years, because he really wanted to be on good terms with her, and she just kept turning him away from Mel. And even though they were engaged, she basically gave him no attention. She always belittled him. She always treated him like absolute trash. So his feelings just festered. I really love the sentence they said a few pages ago. Basically, feelings when you don't say them out loud, they merely fester. It's so true. It is so true, and I absolutely love this. And this is exactly the case with Arthur, because he held to so much anger and so much pain within him. He wanted to say everything, and he just ended up saying it now, and now it doesn't matter because Nellie completely lost her mind. So it's really, really amazing to see that interaction between the two of them. And yeah, crazy, crazy good. It was the best thing to do, he thought. He had his own life to worry about. But fate wouldn't allow him to avoid hearing about the family from time to time. Okay, now we're about to see what happened after. About 4 years later, Nellie, who had apparently fallen ill, passed away at the young age of 18. The Rolls held a small funeral service, which Mel did not attend. Arthur couldn't even begin to imagine what he, her brother, felt about it. But another 3 years later, Mel followed behind her. At the age of 24, he threw himself off the top of a church tower. According to those near him, he had been acting unusual in the months leading up to his death, claiming he could hear a woman's voice talking to him. If he had taken his life out of grief, 3 years earlier seemed like too long of a gap. Perhaps it had built up over time, and that was how long it took to reach the boiling point. But that's not how it felt to Arthur. It felt like Mel had been guided there by a higher power, or maybe pushed. And there was one other strange detail. He had died at exactly the strike of noon, as the bell rang its 12th toll. So, yeah, now we know what Morgana's doing. 100%. And that was pretty much the first story, which was so good. It was the second best story. The worst story is Defective, which I'm saying worse, but it's really good. And the best story is The Painting's Rambling, so I'm really excited to read that again. But let's read Defective. It's about Yukimasa, which is really, really good. It was the weakest of the bunch, but it's still really, really nice. In the distant Hoei area, while the Tokugawa shogunate governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Aida made his living far to the west, with little knowledge of what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turning nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions, and those restrictions applied equally to Japanese, who had departed the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third-generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland, and for that reason, as a child, he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. And he was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had a curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before it was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men before more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed and bequeathed unto him the blade, Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him that looked more like his than even his parents. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down, or like they were a pair of killers standing shoulder to shoulder. With each reoccurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into her world. That he was simply holding in to his true nature. That the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of time when he was still more man than beast. Part 2. Defective. In the wake of framing and killing 2 crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver, Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions, he had been smiling during the act, at least according to those who had seen him. If what's said were true, he wasn't conscious of it, and he didn't particularly doubt the words either. It was, in all likelihood, true. He had killed 2 men and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa most, though, was his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. Not a moment concerned for those men whose lives he has stolen. Once their still-warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the month they had spent out at sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they had been, or how much their families might grieve over their loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. The lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to be fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in a very high stature. He simply had his vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch their legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. What a hellish trip that was, a crewman of Western origin naturally muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it'll be too damn soon. The way the whole crew got their cheeks clenched after that about driven me mad. Not blaming you, I mean, just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the men a faint smile. And in his mind, he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real shit job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd be able to do it and keep a straight face like you did. Bet you're aching to let off some steam, ain't you? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a very different way. Come with me tonight then. I know the perfect place to get you just what you need. The tanned seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about a Captain Osama, don't I any gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew that Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter, and the man standing before him seemed to assume that his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Osama would, as a seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was part of his life on the sea. Everyone understood, and no one considered it being unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partner, who they would often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. For them, sailors were practically the ideal clients. A ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause any similar problem. About the only complaint the prostitute might have is that the sailors tend to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of clientele a new recruit could generally handle. That settles it. Tonight. Grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man, who had taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Osama finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman recommendation. And the last thing he wanted was to catch up some kind of disease. Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which he had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything anywhere else on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place? He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who had boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with his base instincts, but otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? No, it's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later, they're going to toss me out on my ass, and I'll have to resort back to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer. You've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not going to cause you any trouble for you. Well, aren't you sweet? You're lost, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway, I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of your way to explain yourself, so I object to your objection. But you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? Don't see many of your kind around these parts, so it's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you only come around once in a blue moon, so I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here, together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. Ha, you're cute when you scowl. We can find out if you're an animal later, but you're certainly exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. Huh? That wasn't really that funny. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh, combined with a stream of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet, because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple of dry twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple months, and he was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week, although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boat. The stay was, by and large, recreational one. It was early afternoon, and while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed at him for being stiff and tight-ass, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept burying within. And who would ever suspect it either? Who would watch a walk after an elderly man fishing on a dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile, and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I wager, am I right?" the man said as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are. Well, a warning for you then, outsider. You do best to stay away from any back alleys after dark. It ain't safe at night right now. No. Well, Yukimasa gave the man a half smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous part of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. There's already been several victims. Yukimasa froze. As in murders? Killed deader and dead. And they still ain't caught him neither. Wouldn't want any of our guests to end up next on the list. Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching out behind him. He dismembers them. Hard to imagine, cutting a person into a bunch of pieces. He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter, none. He's a sicko, a complete madman, and they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who he might be, or who he might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished that could be. Well, look who it is. Fancy running into you here. Well, in case you haven't figured out, that is Yukimasa. Obviously is the killer, and he wanted to kill the fisherman itself. So, a woman's voice dragged him back to reality. He felt like he had just been pulled off from the bottom of the ocean, and when he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging from the way she was raising her eyebrow at him. "Oh, let me guess. You don't recognize me? Not all made up for work. It's me, the girl from yesterday." She held her hay up in approximation of her previous night hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an in a faint realization. "So what you're wandering out here? Bored? Got nothing better to do?" He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had, technically, been her client the night before. "I'm just taking a walk." "Not much to see out here." "There's the ocean. Don't you get enough of that when you're out on it?" "I'll never tire of the sight of the sea." "Is that so?" she said, followed by a softer, slightly exasperated, "I'll never understand, guys." But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. "So hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come to my place? I can throw together a bare-bones little lunch. Again, I'm taking a walk, and bare-bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. I'm saying, if you want a quality meal, pony up for some good." Ah, so that was what she meant. Apathetic, but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. "I've taken a liking to you," she had said. "Stop by whenever you got the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you even better than when I'm on the job, and free of charge. What do you have to lose?" So, that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine. And the more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planned to start a family, but money trouble led to debt piling on, which led her husband running out on her. And with the entirety of their debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at a brothel. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If everything she said was true, she had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, though to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solitary in the woman's solitude. The sense she was missing something. The sense she had a hunger. The sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. The sense she was a defective. She was defective. Which is the name of this tale. You know, we got on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you could, I don't know, take me as your mistress? She sounded like she was only playing around, but still he responded with, "It's not wise to pair two defectives together." "What's that supposed to mean?" she said with a scowl. Yukimasa Ships was to depart the following day, and that evening, the woman asked him to stay the night, to which he was unsure how to react. "Don't you have work?" "I'll just say I wasn't feeling well. It's not like anyone wants me there." "But don't you need, I can survive taking one day off. I want to be with you." And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he would be heading back out to sea the following day, likely never to see the woman again. So rather than waste time debating her own life choices, it would be easier if he just let her do as she pleased. Tomorrow, none of it would be his concern after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. "I'm going to make you a feast tonight," she said. "You're paying, though." Yukimasa wondered if, perhaps, what she wanted the most was to play like they were a real family. That was probably it. What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. But that raised a new question. What happened after she had her fun? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake, and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. "Oh, I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I?" There was nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. "May I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah?" "How did it feel when you lost your family, your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart." "I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and let her run off on you." Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, "But I don't want you to have to go through that." Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal, something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Does he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait. But he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him, living or otherwise. "Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed. And I'm not going to let it happen again. Not this time. You may think sneaking off without a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning, let me say a proper goodbye." "No, I wasn't." "You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think me as a free tale for the week. You're just going to forget about when it's over. I'm using you for my own personal satisfaction too. But the one thing I won't stand for is you just up and disappearing on me. You're not the one being left behind, so you don't understand how worthless and pathetic that makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me." That was probably what she wanted to say more than anything else. The loneliness had created the hole in her heart, was making waves, and this was a real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore. "I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I want to give you, and I was just going to get it." "And what would that be?" "It's my way of showing gratitude." "Huh, I think the word you're looking for is present?" "Yes, that." Her eyes were locked with Yukimasa. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. After 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go. "I won't be long," he said with a smile. As he walked down the moonlit port, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. Some say you know yourself best, others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of the self is full of such uncertainties, contradictions. Yukimasa suspected he was suppressing himself with his self. So while he had a reasonable grasp on who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery. And that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self, which of his desires was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, and then slowly lowered her gaze. Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good about thinking of anyone other than myself. I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I spend a great deal of time thinking about you. The woman took a step back. Yukimasa followed, and I've concluded this is the best way for me to make you happy. She didn't even have time to let out a shriek. There was only the sound of steel slicing flesh, metal grinding against bone, as the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast. Her mouth splashed open and shut, while her eyes were held wide open, fixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips and sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry and shout and say this wasn't what she wanted. But there wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As the blood spilled down the side of her lips, she mustered the last scraps of her strength, and with it, she forced out of parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he had heard every last one. "You, pitiful man. What kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a ruthless prostitute?" She curses him as her life slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered, "Don't you worry, I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse." "Hey, Yukimasa, you heard about that whore you'd been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. I swear, it's like trouble follow you wherever you go." "Lord Almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit be taken a liking to you." That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly out at the port town as it faded out of view. He then turned towards the ocean, that vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood. "Can I ask you something, Pauline?" Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. "Anything. What would you think if I were actually an unspeakable evil man?" "Unspeakably evil man. Where'd that come from? She asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. Idle curiosity. "Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sort of bad thing would you do?" "How about committing murder?" "Deceiving people?" The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he'd prepared to say, which came as a surprise to even him. Why had he not been able to say what he wanted? What reason could he responsibly have had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain. But no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best as I can, but I'm sure I slip from time to time. So listen to me, Yukimasa. Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile. Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. You've got nothing to worry about. Besides, I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what's my life dreams in? I'd love to. My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. I don't need anything extravagant, just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children, would never fight, and eventually, before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. And what about you? Now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. And that was Defective, which was a really good story, but as I said, it was the weakest of the bunch. That being said, my bias against Yukimasa is probably had something to do with it, for sure. But also, the thing I really didn't like is the fact that it didn't continue anything. It was kind of story in between what happened. It happened even before, like, the actual second door. It happened before that. So, yeah, it didn't have any effect on the story. It just kind of showed us what Yukimasa think, which was good. I appreciated it greatly. It was really good. But it didn't provide any later story, any progression, right? Unlike the first and the third story, which will provide it. So that's what I didn't like about the second part. That being said, we're about to hit the third part, which is the best story out of the 3. So I'm excited to give it a reread, because it was so damn good. Yeah, here it comes. Part 3, The Painting's Ramblings. Why hello there, Giselle. Doing your rounds again? Such a diligent young lady you are. You could get away with cleaning this place once every couple decades and no one would be the wiser. What? You're not Giselle? That's someone else? Oh no, you're just the maid. And who am I, you ask? Well, this is quite a pickle. What on earth could have happened while I was dozing off? You think you're just a maid, and you think you're the witch at the same time. You've forgotten just about everything, and I don't think anything that I say is going to fix that. You do seem a bit mellower now, and not so constantly miserable. Wasn't sure what to say to you before, or if I should say anything at all. So I didn't say much, out of consideration for you. Not that you could really tell from looking at me, I guess. If forgetting takes some weight off you, then maybe it's for the best. Not that I think you should forget, and not that I want you to forget about Michelle. But I won't blame you for choosing not to spend God knows how much longer agonizing over it. Nothing wrong with abandoning ship, especially considering how long you spent on it. And hey, it hurt me too seeing you in so much pain, so we both come out on top here, I guess. What kind of painting, you say? What kind of painting, you say? Ha, well, thank you kindly. But the truth is, I'm not nearly as upstanding as a guy as people think I am. And it was us, Boilingers, that turned your life upside down and caused you all that misery and suffering. Yeah, I know. The first dumbfounded smile was testament enough. Everything I say going in one ear and out the other. Which means I'm free to say whatever I want. By the time tomorrow rolls around, you'll have forgotten all about the curious talking painting you chanced upon today. So I'll start with this. It's a huge relief to see you smiling again. It's not the smile of someone right in the head, I can see that much. But it's a lot easier on the eyes and the heart than how you were before. Like I said, I'm a real winner. I'm not particularly concerned about putting up appearances here. Call me a heartless if you will, you wouldn't be wrong. I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint, but at the same time, I'm not going to play like I'm a cackling villain either. If there's one thing I don't want people to see, though, it's me looking weak. I'm the laid-back guy without a care in the world, and that's who I want people to see when they look at me. My big brother was your standard cookie cutter, you can count on me for anything kind of brother. I mean, that ended up not being the case, but he sure looked the part. And Michelle, he always looked up to thee, went to him for everything, gave him all his love. Dee was tall and well-built, muscular, everything about him screamed manly man, and I kinda admire that too, though not nearly as much as Michelle did. I became a painter in part because I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps. Not to say I don't like painting, I love it, but people weren't going to be inclined to compare us as often. I didn't have to be fit as him or as good at chess. I had my own thing to be good at, art. I couldn't beat him at his own game, so I beat him at mine. And my whole not a care in the world deal was probably, at least on some level, a shield against having to admit I couldn't compare. If we were a few years further apart, maybe I could have just the same admiration and respect for him as Michelle. But there's not much getting past that boyish competitiveness when you're so close in age. I know, I've been rambling at you for a while already, but would you mind sticking around for a little longer? Great. I've got an old story I'd like to get off my chest. This is something I was planning to take to the grave, and something I don't think Giselle ever needs to know. But well, you say you're not Giselle anymore, and I'm already in the grave, so what the hell. I'm just gonna talk to myself for a bit here, and if you kindly forget anything you may overhear, that'd be lovely. So this is Georges, in case nobody realized, and he's gonna tell us his story. What happened? Back before I became a painting, I was the head of the Boilinger family. Though I spent most of my time painting. It really wasn't a job for me though. A guy who half-assed his way straight through life. So I left all the businessy stuff to my wife, Amy. No, she was a real capable girl. If she'd been born a guy, she would have made one heck of a diplomat. Possibly even caught the king's eye. Before we were married, she had a bit of a fling with Dee, which he felt real bad about later. Probably didn't hope that I had the tendency to bring it up from time to time. Not all the time, just occasionally. But at his side, she was a faithful, hard-working partner. It didn't take long for us to become known as the dope and his able bride, to which Amy would always interject. Georges is a very capable man, thank you very much. Now, that probably makes it sound like I just dropped all the work of running the house onto her. But in truth, she wanted the job, she quite enjoyed it, and who was I to complain? It also meant I didn't have to deal with one of the family's more significant dilemmas, namely my mother. Not to be crass, but Mom was not quite all there. She'd always been a bit of a nervous wreck, and it didn't take much to set her off. But it was what had happened with Michelle that finally broke her. Mom had, I guess you could say, a very particular image of what she wanted Michelle to be, and he ended up not fitting that image. Now, you're probably thinking, that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but it is. I just can't tell you why. Michelle has to be the one to tell you. Anyway, some bad stuff went down, and at the end of it all, Mom was constantly hovering over the edge. Dad gave up on her entirely, and I just wasn't sure how to approach her, so I kept my distance. Amy was the only one in the family who would actively engage with Mom. So while she had betrayed me once, I had come to trust Amy again. We had a couple of kids, turned into a doting father, and life was swell. All my problems swept under the rug. Mom's condition, Michelle. I left it all to Amy and enjoyed a pleasant, carefree life. But then Giselle, or I guess you're just the maid now. Not long after Michelle died. My, oh my, you really aren't Giselle anymore, huh? So back to my rambling. Michelle died, and I got furious at Dee over it, but I keep coming back to that. Who really deserved the brunt of the blame in that situation? It's nice and comfy to sit back and do nothing. You can throw blame around all you want. It wasn't your fault after all. You're not the one who killed him, you know. It wasn't long afterwards that Dee died too, killed on the battlefield. I was told he died a very noble death, but I couldn't help to think that he was in a hurry to escape. Listening to the news, I kept telling myself I should have snapped at him like that. I should have blamed him. Dee had to choose between protecting Mom and protecting our brother, and he settled on Mom. He was too hard-headed to come up with a way to protect them both. Though even if he had, it was too risky. He served the church directly, and we were all under his thumb. If word spread that one of our own had supposedly sold his soul to the devil, that would be the end of the Boilinger family. I wouldn't have escaped unscathed either. Losing both of my brothers in a quick succession crushed me. And as I started breaking down, it was, you guessed it, Amy who comforted me. It's terrible what happened, but it's not your fault. That was around when I began sensing something was off. I mean, she'd had a thing with Dee. You'd expect she would have been bawling her eyes out right alongside me, so why on earth was she so calm? But I didn't press her on it. I knew I wouldn't get an answer even if I did. And I also didn't have much of a right to question Amy when I was pushing all my problems onto her. Doubtly so, knowing that opening my dumb mouth was what had done this to Dee in the first place. And before long, we went back to our normal routine. About 8 years after Michelle's death, Mom was gone too, and the Boilinger family was down to me, Amy, and our 2 sons. I had started teaching the boys how to paint, and I loved every minute of it. And then, one day, I started feeling unwell. My fingers would get kind of tingly, such that holding a brush for long periods of time would hurt. So gradually, my time spent both teaching and painting dwindled, and even leaving the manor became difficult. At first, I just thought it was a little strange, nothing to be worried about. But then it started getting real bad, and I'd be stuck in bed for days at a time. We called the doctor to look at me, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Amy said I must be overworking myself, and she made me these nice hearty meals hoping to bring back my energy. But my condition only got worse. Eventually, I started losing my appetite. But Amy, she insisted I eat anyway, or I would never get better. So you know what I did? I tossed out the meals she made when she wasn't looking. I sent my younger boy out to buy food in secret. And for a while, I ate that instead of Amy meals, making sure it looked like nothing had changed. And after a week or two, the tingling in my fingers started going away. I could only laugh and grit my teeth, then cry my eyes out. I made a life with this woman, trusted her, and she goes and does this. Anger and sorrow were drowned out by raw heartbreak. My firstborn, he was getting to be at that age where he could take over, which is why I had used my younger son to run errands for me. I couldn't be sure the two weren't working together. I was at a total loss. What are you supposed to do when your wife trying to poison you through slow death? Even now, I'm not sure what the right course of action in that situation would have been. Maybe I could have banished her, had her punished, but I remember, I was only head in name. She handled everything, and there was no way I would have been able to pick up the pieces after throwing her out. And if my suspicion were right and my older boy was in on it too, getting rid of Amy wouldn't have solved anything. What then? Spend the rest of my days living in fear of my own family? I was, by that point, worn pretty thin, both physically and emotionally. Every thought led me to the worst possible outcome. I couldn't, for the life of me, come up with a workable solution. Eventually, I got it into my head that it was a punishment, that I deserved it. Obviously, what Amy was doing wasn't right, but my hands weren't exactly clean either. Maybe Mom could have recovered if I had looked after her. Maybe Dee would still be alive if I'd put myself in his shoes instead of just napping at him. Maybe if I'd given everyone the care and attention they deserved, Michelle wouldn't have had to die. Burying your head in the sand doesn't absolve you of responsibility. And when I finally realized how great a sin inaction was, it was far too late. I'm dumb, short-sighted, and I hated myself when I figured it out sooner. It should have been stupidly obvious that my action and my inaction were doing to the people around me. I should have seen all of this coming. Yeah, Amy had betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one guilty of that. When I was going through Michelle's stuff after his death, I came across a painting that had been torn to shreds, that I had made. By refusing to use my head, I had done something that denied his identity. And he left this world still carrying the pain I had caused him. By the time I had come to that conclusion, I wonder why I was even alive at all. I couldn't blame anyone for wanting me dead, so I started eating Amy meals again, knowing good and well it would likely kill me. I didn't stop sending my younger boy out though, just not for the food. I also strongly encouraged him to move out and become a curt artist. Then, I started painting again. It was going to be my final piece. Every day, the tingling in my head spread a little further. My breathing grew a little more labored. I was afraid that I might not finish while I was still able to get out of bed, but I somehow managed. It was the most harrowing experience I had painting something in my entire life. True to her facade, Amy stayed at my side until my last breath. She held my right hand, giving me a strange smile. It didn't occur to me at the time, but Amy always seemed to be smiling, no matter what. In a way, it's kind of impressive how she managed to keep up the loving wife act while simultaneously loading me up with poison. Tell me, Amy, how deep did your poison flow? when you were looking after Mom, did you talk about Michelle? Knowing you probably figure out he was still alive. And I bet you read his final letter to her. It was you who pushed her to set everything in motion, wasn't it? There were so many things I wanted to say, but I stayed my tongue and made these my parting words. I loved you so much, Amy. So I ask you this. Keep my last painting in memory of me. I have no idea if she actually did as I requested, but the last thing I saw before I passed was her nodding, a smile on her lips. The paint I used to make it, I mixed with a special something I had my younger boy go out and buy for me. A substance that, according to what I was told, slowly dissolved into the air, making it toxic. And it has some sort of reaction with the paint as well, turning it almost black, which is the painting in the manner. I'm quite proud of how it turned out, if I do say so myself. It was a gorgeous landscape painting. This is the painting in the manner that his soul was contained in, so this is incredible. Man, reading it again, wow. Sorry for rambling at you for so long. That's the end of my story. Ah, were you even listening to me? What, you have to go clean the fireplace? Well, alright, don't let me keep you. Just please, make sure you forget everything by tomorrow, alright? I'm counting on you. I know, why even say anything, right? I want to tell someone, I just don't want anyone to actually know about it. The human heart is a big bowl of contradiction like that, you know? You don't? Oh, okay. Well, see ya. It'll be another few decades before you come by again, I imagine. And when you do, will it be our first time meeting again? Will you even be able to hear my voice anymore by then? Maybe it'd be best if I forgot everything too. Who knows? So long, maid, and take care. When an angel come to judge me, how will its scales tilt? Towards forgiveness or towards reckoning? But you know, I don't want it to be an angel who makes that decision. No, you don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be an angel at all. Yeah, reading it again was so good. It is truly the best story of the bunch, without a single doubt in my mind. It is so goddamn good. I love the fact that we got to see, you know, what happened with the Georges after the story have ended, the story of Fata Morgana. And it was incredible. He ate his wife's meals even though he knew it was poisoned and will lead him to death. And he wanted to do that because he wanted to punish himself for what he has done, or more likely to what he hadn't done. And that's incredible. The fact that he explained that fence-sitting is sometimes even worse than taking action because you don't do something. You don't do anything. You could have prevented anything from happening and you didn't do it. You just sat on your back and wanted to live a relaxed life, but that came at a price. And that is something that's very applicable to real life. And that was amazing. I love the lesson that we learned from that story. It's incredible. And it was truly such a great experience rereading it. And you know what? That actually was good. I actually enjoy rereading everything, so I'm glad I got to re-record it. And again, I apologize for not noticing I haven't uploaded. I have no idea what came over me when I didn't do that. I somehow, I guess, missed it because I record numerous times. I mean, I record multiple videos at the same day, so I guess this video must have slipped. But that's on me. That's on me. I'm totally to blame for it. But hey, I took action and I recorded it. And that is kind of fitting today's story, right? I mean, it's amazing. I loved everything about it. And man, the music, man. I got to see this screen again. So you know what? It was all worth it. Hopefully you guys will forgive me for this one. Whenever I'm gonna play a visual novel again, I'm definitely gonna make sure I won't be skipping anything. I will do my absolute damnedest not to be, you know, missing anything ever again like this. So I apologize for it again. But yeah, it was amazing and an incredible experience. And if something good came out of it, is that I learned my lesson and I re-recorded everything and got to see this amazing screen again and the beautiful music. I mean, I still, don't get me wrong, I still listen to the music when I'm not playing this game because the soundtrack is incredible. But yeah, I'm so glad I got to see this picture again. I think this is probably the best background we had in the game. I love it so damn much. It is so good. So I'm glad I got to experience it again. It is definitely the background I love the most. I thought the background in the end of Fata Morgana was good with the flowers, but this is just better. This is 10 times better, if I must admit it. Oh man, the music, it's so good. It's so good, I cannot stop talking about it. But yeah, you know what? That'll be all. So again, thank you guys so much for sticking to this journey with me. I enjoyed playing the house in Fata Morgana and Requiem for Innocence so damn much. I'm gonna start a visual novel not too far from now. I have a few games I want to experience before that. There was a game I was playing. I'm gonna upload a few videos of it, see how it goes. If the reception isn't good, I'm going to discontinue it. And if the reception is good to the other games I'm going to play, there are some new games I'm excited to share with you guys. They aren't visual novels, but hopefully you guys enjoyed them just as much. Yeah, if the reception will be good, I'll continue playing them. After that, I'm gonna start playing a different visual novel, so again, keep giving me your recommendations. You have given me so far really great ones, but keep those piling up, because I'm gonna choose one visual novels from them. But yeah, that's all for now. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.